Jennie Joseph presents The Hands That Caught Us, a legacy podcast series with our midwife elders, an archival offering through the Perinatal Pause Podcast with Jennie Joseph, where we rest, reclaim, and remember one story at a time. Welcome to The Hands That Caught Us, a sacred series within the Perinatal Pause Podcast with Jennie Joseph. In each episode, we sit in reverence with our elder midwives, keepers of ancestral knowledge, community healers, and witnesses to the sacred continuum of life. These conversations are a pause, a restoration, and a reclaiming of our birthright. These are the stories that built us, and these are the stories that sustain us.
Welcome, Mama Sameerah Shareef, midwife, elder, powerhouse, amazing person. I'm so happy you're here, that you've joined me today. I'm dying to hear all your stories because I know you have many. And I'm just grateful that you said yes. So thank you.
You're welcome. It's my pleasure. I'm just so honored to be asked. I have long admired your work and the fact that we finally got to meet last year.
Yes. Wasn't that something?
That
accidentally?
Was awesome. Yes. And I ended up going simply because you were going to be one of the people that was presenting. So I thank you for saying yes for last year so that I can go and that we could make that connection.
Yeah, it was a wonderful time to be relaxing and yet learning, supporting each other. And it was such a blessing to know that we finally could have that, intimate time together. This is one of the things I think that's really, of note. There are a few of us elders, particularly African American or Afro descent elders, who are still practicing or still available to us. We are loosely coming together, trying to find each other. I had to go halfway across the world to Bali to find you, but it worked out. And the reason we want to record and understand and hear the stories of the elder midwives is because first of all, there's so much history and they're so rich with all of the experiences, but also we need to find each other. We need to keep looking for each other because there's so many of us on the ground, deep in the work, have always been, moving through life and unknown and recognized, unacknowledged even. So, Mama Sameerah, tell me, where did midwifery hit you? How did it start? When was that? Tell us the story.
Yes. Well, I was a young college student, got married at the age of 19, and my oldest was born about a month before the first anniversary. So I got married, got pregnant, had a baby, and I always like to put in that I still ended up finishing my program on time. I still did the 4 years. So because I'm just sort of naturally inclined towards intellect and study and everything, I did what I considered my due diligence. Back then, the Lamaze classes were big. So I took my Lamaze class.
What year are we talking about, Sameerah?
That would have been 19. My son was born in 1975. So I would have been taking classes. He was born in July, so I would have been taking classes like earlier in 1975 to prepare myself for what I absolutely wanted to be a normal birth, just give me safe space kind of thing. I was getting prenatal care from public health clinic. At the time, it was called the Jean Granger Prenatal Clinic. It was part of Ingham County Health Department here in the Lansing, Michigan area. So I went to my classes, I did my prenatal care, and I thought I was all prepared to go and advocate for myself, et cetera, et cetera. So anyway, I go into labor. I also like to always add that that was back when they were always sticking their fingers in women, like a lot has changed. 20 some weeks on, they're always in there checking, So I had gone for an appointment on July 3rd, and the doctor said to me, "Your cervix is nowhere near ready, just go home and relax. It's probably going to be a couple more weeks," because my due date was July 7th. So I like cried all the way home because it was just so discouraging for him to say what he said to me in the way that he did. And that was an early lesson for me that would serve me much. Um, it would serve me a lot when I started being a midwife. So anyway, long story short, I went home. A friend of mine said, "Don't worry, let's make some food and we'll go for a cookout, for the 4th of July." Well, I went to bed at 9 o'clock on July 3rd, and at 10:30 on July 3rd, 10:30 p.m., I was in full blown labor. I woke up in labor. So I'm excited, but I'm uncomfortable because I'm having contractions and I'm doing all of my breathing and everything like that. And my then husband, he's doing his thing too. So anyway, we get to the hospital and they admit me, and then things kind of go out the window after that.
Mm.
Yeah, it was. You're one of those. You're what do they call it? Granola cruncher. So you think you're. I mean, I had actually had nurses say you. So you really think you're going to just have this baby? Okay, well we'll see. And had no support really other than my spouse at the time. And so now, because I had gone in with the whole preparation with
Yeah.
Lamaze, that the support was going to be there, et cetera, et cetera. So things just kind of went awry. Um, so, then I had an IV, and then they said, well, we're going to give you some Demerol, because back then
That's the
there
day.
were
Yeah.
no epidurals there. So they said,
Mhm.
we're going to give you some Demerol, and the nurse said, oh, this is going to be so helpful or whatever. And I remember laying there thinking, it's not doing anything. And so when I got to really active labor, it's like you have to stay in bed. And I thought,
Yeah.
no, that's not the way I prepared. I was
Yeah.
not prepared for the no, you have to stay in the bed. It's best for you and your baby. And that was back when they did labor rooms. Then you went to the delivery room. Then
Right. You had to move.
you had to move. So I get to the point of, they're saying, okay, we're going to take you to the delivery room. And now I get to the delivery room, and it was back where they actually put you in lithotomy with your legs buckled in stirrups.
That's right.
And I, again, having done Lamaze, and I was all this, we're going to do the position changes and everything, and my body was going to do this. And the doctors are telling me you have to lay flat yet. And I'm like, I just need to get up. If I get up, I know I can get the baby out. No, you have to. And then they put all of the draping over you. And so I would have a contraction. I would reach for my belly. And one of the doctors grabbed my hand and said, if you put your hands there again, we're going to tie your hands down. So now I'm so freaked out because there's so much stuff going on that
Yeah.
this wasn't the way it's supposed to be. So then they start saying, well, we're going to have to do a C-section. And so now I'm really, really freaked out. And
Mm.
they said, well, but the anesthesiologist is about 45 minutes out. And I always say that's what saved me. Okay. So I remember getting up as much as I could on my elbows because you had to be flat, saying, I'm going to have this baby. If nobody's here to help me, just get the hell out. And so then the doc said, okay, we're going to do forceps. And they're telling me lay flat, et cetera, et cetera. Can you imagine forceps with just maybe I think they gave me a pericervical block, maybe?
Uh-huh. Yeah. That's
So, yeah,
most
so
likely.
no,
Hmm.
so they put these metal things in me, and they, of course, they bring my son out. And I always like to say, my son is 50 years old. He is still one of the most calm, collected people I have ever known, very laid back. And I remember looking at him when we went and I had a 4th degree
Oh.
extension. So
Oh.
that took about an hour and a half to repair. So I'm in the delivery
Mm.
room, and my baby's somewhere. So we go into recovery. He is in a little baby box, little plastic crib things. And I remember looking at him, and I said, you were so worth it. I love you so much. But something has to be wrong with what just happened.
Mm.
So that started me on my journey to actually just in my intellectual, because
Yeah.
that's kind of who I am. I started studying birth. And I discovered this, what some considered back then, this underground movement of weird folks that believed in natural birth. And so I studied, I was actually a laboratory scientist at the time. That's my first degree was in medical technology. So after studying and everything, I'm like, yeah, this is what it's supposed to be. It's not supposed to be all the craziness that I experienced. Oh, and then let's just give you a little bit more. Okay, so he was born on the 4th of July, which is a holiday for some people that are here in this country. Um, and I remember one of the nurses coming in, and this was back when they had visiting hours twice a day. But during visiting hours, your baby had to go to the nursery. So I was so radical. I was breastfeeding too, right? So one of the nurses said, "You do realize that nobody wants to be here. It's a holiday weekend," because he was born on Friday.
Ooh.
Yeah. See the thing, but this is my thing, Jenny. God set me up in that experience so that I would not be that kind of provider. So I'm breastfeeding, and there were nurses that were saying I had no support for breastfeeding. One nurse told me, your baby's going to die. You have no idea how much milk is in your breast. Baby's not going to get enough. Baby's going. I mean, I spent the 2-3 days I was there, three days I think it was, crying because
Yeah.
I had
Yeah.
absolutely no support whatsoever. So what saved me was a phone call to the Leche League, because this is in 1975. So there was no cell phone, there was no,
Yes.
social media, there was no
Right.
computers, stuff like that. But I called this woman, and for the life of me, even after 50 years, I can't remember her name, but she literally talked me into successful breastfeeding. So yeah,
She provided the support that was missing.
exactly, and over the phone, we never had a face to face, and so she was just so wonderful. And so needless to say, he's a grown man now, but that was my start into midwifery. So I just started studying and
Mm.
figuring out. I remember I was a childbirth educator. I trained to become a childbirth educator, so I did that for a number of years before I went back to nursing school. And I went to nursing school specifically to be a midwife. um,
Mm.
and I worked as a staff nurse. I've worked every area of maternal child, women's health, all of that. And I remember this would have been in the 80s. Kitty Ernst, the late Kitty Ernst, came to Lansing, and there was a hospital here then called St. Lawrence. It's since been absorbed by another hospital system. And she said to me, she said, we need you. She said, if a midwife is what you want to be, consider being a nurse midwife. Can you get back into nursing school, et cetera, et cetera. So I did that. I ended up going back to nursing school. And I was in the CNEP program that she created through
Yes.
Frontier. I was in class 3.
So what year was that class?
That would have been 92. I've been a
Okay.
nurse midwife since 93. So it was either fall of 91 or early 92, because I finished that program in 15 months, I think it was. Yeah.
Well, I mean, do you see? I mean, just right there, everything
Hmm.
you've just described, and that, where you started and where you landed because of that experience. And this is
Yes.
the thing. I mean, your son is 50, but it seems like no matter how old we get and how old our kids are, we remember that birth. We remember the pregnancy a lot of times, but we
Absolutely.
for sure remember the birth, no matter which way it went, good or bad or indifferent. We
Yes.
remember that.
Hmm. Yeah.
It becomes embodied. Let's go back then. Let's think. Talk to us about who caught you. How far back can
Mm.
you recall in terms of like,
Wow.
who's in your line? Are there ancestor
That,
midwives? Are there nurses?
yeah, yeah, that I don't know. It's really interesting that you ask. It was a doctor that attended my mom when she had me, born and raised in Detroit.
Hmm.
So she would have gone to, I think on my birth certificate it says Wayne Diagnostic Hospital is what it was called then, but it was whatever hospital the quote unquote Negroes went to at that time. I
Yes.
don't I don't have any birth story
Hmm.
because I didn't have enough insight to ask my mom those questions.
Right,
about,
right.
and plus my mother and certainly my grandmother were of the generation that women didn't talk about female stuff.
That's right.
Plus my
Yet, if
mom
they
was
were
young.
asked, if they were
Yes.
asked, they may have shared because, again, we hold those stories.
Mm-hmm. Well, I remember asking my grandmother about when she had my mother, because my mother was an only child, and she said, "Well, we don't, we don't really talk about that." My mom was 56 when she died. I was 24 when
She
my
died
mom died.
early.
So, and I, as a 20 some year old, early 20s, I didn't think that I wouldn't have time to ask the questions later.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, so I think it was probably a pretty traditional hospital birth for back then. And I'm sitting here thinking, I don't ever remember my mother giving any of our birth stories. There were four of
Mm-hmm.
us,
Mm-hmm.
and I had my three kids. I just never thought about asking her those questions. As far as healers in the family, my sisters and I have been doing the genealogical thing, so we're
Okay.
just starting to really find out, especially on my mom's side. But I don't know of any stories of any midwives in the family, but I wouldn't be surprised if there's not some. Because my mom and my grandmother both were, well, okay, thank you, Holy Spirit. They were healers.
There you go. Okay.
See, because I tell people all the time, we were rarely sick. Because my mom, we got cod liver oil at least twice a month. And if you got sick, you got castor oil because they believed that a good purgative
Yes.
was going to help you heal, help you
Right.
feel
Right.
better. So we learned not to say that we were sick because we didn't want to take that castor oil. But my mom knew different teas and things like that, and my grandmother knew different teas. But again, even after I became a midwife, I didn't think, because my mom had passed on by the time I became a midwife. But even with talking with my grandmother, I didn't have enough insight to ask those questions.
Right.
Yeah.
These are things that we've, over the years, over the decades, haven't really brought forward. And it speaks to, I think, how complete the elimination of midwifery was
Yes.
in the
Yes.
United States
Mm-hmm.
post Jim Crow,
Mm-hmm.
post mid 20th century. Like that literal plan and the propaganda that went with it was
Yes.
so impactful and actually fulfilled on what it was supposed to do, where
Yes.
you took an entire body of, you know, perinatal workers, whether they were midwives or they were supporting mothers, families during the postpartum, home-based, all right,
Mm-hmm. Yes.
community-based, community supported, community loved, community
Yes.
cherished.
Yes.
That has completely gone, but the
Yes.
legacy of that remains. It remains in, for example, the story you shared of your birthing experience, the way that that was conducted, the way those nurses were able, with impunity, to be,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because they had removed any vestige of patient-centered,
Yes.
woman-centered care and support in the process of being pregnant, giving birth, postpartum, breastfeeding. That
Right.
happened at the same
Mm-hmm.
time and became the new baseline as the midwives were eradicated.
Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. And as I encountered stories during my time of being a nurse. Like I said, I worked every area: neonatal intensive care, I worked OB special care, labor and delivery, postpartum nursery, all of anything related to moms and babies. And I was just trying to just eat up anything that I could get, any information I could get. So when I went back to midwifery school, I felt like I was home. This is what I should be doing. Um,
That is an expression right there.
yeah.
You came full circle home and you
Mm-hmm.
felt it embodied, right? You felt it as
Yes.
part of your being.
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Well, and the interesting thing is, sometimes my intellectualism can can get me crossed up, so to speak. Um, I remember being in midwifery school, studying, even when I was in nursing school, studying, and things would come up to, you know, how you face these challenges. And I remember thinking, okay, maybe maybe it's not what I should be doing. And and now I know what God called me to do. I say all of my ministries have M's. You know, I'm mother, midwife, and minister. Um, but I remember thinking, okay, maybe this is not what I'm supposed to do. And every time I had that thought, I got an affirmation in a
No.
form, because God knows I need literal stuff, right? And one of the interesting ones is that when I would have those kind of thoughts, all of a sudden I'd be surrounded by pregnant women.
Look, I think
I'd
so
say, God,
many
I'm
of
not
us,
going to do this. See, I don't
right?
want to do this. I don't want to do all this study. I don't want to do this. And I'd look up and somebody's sitting next to me and she's visibly pregnant. And so I'm
I,
like, okay, I'm pretty quick, you know, I'm a pretty quick study. God knows how to deal with me. So every time I would get anything like, and stuff just fell in place. The money fell in place.
mm-hmm.
Um, the opportunities, because we had back then with the CNET program, you had to find your own preceptor. So
Well,
I
let's
had,
explain a bit more about that
mm,
program because
okay.
that was one of the pivotal moments in terms of midwifery training in the United States as
Hmm.
midwifery has begun to regrow. We're not going that
Yes.
fast, but one of the early opportunities was being able to study for midwifery, but remain in your community. Do you want to share a
Yes.
little bit about that program?
Yes. Yes. The Community Based Nurse Midwifery Education Program is what it was called, CNEP. And Kitty designed it so that you could stay in your home community to for the vast majority of your training. We had to go for what was called then midwifery bound. I don't know if they still have that, but it was an orientation extended over, I think we were there 7 days. So you had your orientation, you met your instructors, you had huge binders, modules full of education that you had to do each one for antepartum, intrapartum, postpartum, GYN, family planning, contraception. So you had to have someone that was going to be your preceptor when you got through all of your didactic information, when it was time for your clinical training. And I was saying this to a young midwife that I just had an opportunity to meet. And I was saying, imagine your computer, a desktop computer that's just black and white text. That's what computerized learning was back then. But that's how
Back
we
in the
did our
day.
assignments. You went on, it was called the banyan tree. You went
Mhm.
on there, you submitted your assignments. You had to have a proctor in your home community that secured your exams. So at that time, it was the um, director of the Lansing Community College nursing program. And I had gone through that program for nursing. So um, the head of the department, I would go to her office when it was time for my exams, and she would secure my exams. So what it did was it enabled me to still to be home and I actually worked. I don't
Mhm.
know a time when I haven't worked. I think I've been working continuously since I was like 15, 16 years old. But I could work part-time. I could do the during the didactic or the modules parts of the program. I could do that and still work. Um, and then I was at University of Michigan Women's Hospital for 5 months for my preceptorship and my clinical training. And then I actually spent a month at a freestanding birth center in Reading, Pennsylvania with Susan
Mm.
Stapleton. She was my preceptor there. So it enabled that you didn't have to, because the choices at the time were the traditional educational programs where you had to be in person.
Yes,
Like
of
if you
course.
went to Yale, if you went to, I think Georgetown had a program, then U of M had a program, but you actually had to be there. So for many people, that would have meant having to pick up and move,
That's
which a
right.
lot, which a lot of people did to attend the nurse midwife program. So yeah,
So you were in the third class. Again, what year was that?
That would have been, I took my comprehensive exams February of 1993, and I took my boards and passed them in March of 1993.
Wow. So think back, you were the third class that took this
Mhm.
CNET program, which was again
Mhm.
a brilliant idea and intervention that opened up opportunities for people. How many people of color do you recall being able to,
I'm sitting here thinking there was in actually in class 3, I think there was one more.
okay.
And then I think there was one that I met that was either, maybe she was class 2. There were just a couple of us.
A handful of
Yeah.
y'all.
Yeah.
Yeah, pioneering in the 90s and accessing midwifery training from a nursing standpoint,
Mhm.
but going
Mhm.
into a program that was really preparing you all to be able to return right back to the communities where you
Yes.
lived and to
Yes.
serve the families in those communities. I think about the relationship between ancestral midwifery, indigenous midwifery, the midwifery that the African enslaved women practiced, that
Mhm.
they
Mhm.
handed on. And,
Yes.
the one thing that I think stands with midwifery across the world, even now, is the empirical sharing of knowledge,
Yes. Yes.
the passing on of the tricks of the trade, the nuances, the culturally specific pieces that keep
Mhm.
midwifery safe, but also keep
Yes.
families safe.
Yes.
And so
Absolutely.
here we are as we continue to try to build out this movement for midwifery in the US to regain some footage, regain some power about midwifery and for midwifery, with midwifery. What do you have as far as your thoughts around where midwifery is right now?
Hmm. Hmm. I can I can speak authoritatively about the area that I live in.
Mhm.
For a long time, for probably about 10 years, I was the only in hospital midwife option. So I practiced by myself for 10 years, which meant being on call 24/7, et cetera, et cetera, because of the commitment that I have for the women in this community. And we've worked very hard to try to give women in the greater Lansing area options
Mhm.
for where they want to birth, how they want their birth to be configured, if you will. Um, and I see that we still are having the same struggles.
Yes.
And, and I think a lot of it is because of the way that healthcare is done in this country, certainly,
Mhm.
and how women's bodies and the things that women's bodies can do have been co-opted, and we've been sold and continue to be sold this idea that somehow we are bringing new human beings into the world in a defective way. And what I mean by that, there's still that viewpoint that somehow pregnancy and birth is just waiting to go wrong, instead of this is a normal process. The way I explain to people that come to me is that I've been trained the like the parameters of normal, so to speak, and
Yes.
I'm very comfortable with some things that other birth providers might not be. Like, I have women come in and say, I'm not doing actively doing births right now, but I'm doing in office stuff. But when I was doing births, women would say, well, will I be allowed to change position? And I say, just because you come to the hospital, you're not in prison. You don't lose your rights. There's
Mhm.
nothing that you have to do. There's nothing that you don't have to do. Our job, my job in specifically, is to make sure things are going well and to communicate with you and stuff like that, and just give you a safe space to have your baby. So
That's
you mean
right.
I can have a baby? I can have my baby on my hands and knees? It's like, yeah. Laying on my side, yeah. Standing up, yeah. I mean, we've had like, this may not sound like much, but we've had a battle about birthing tubs. We still don't have any birthing tubs in the hospitals here that are doing births, because I remember saying this in a meeting a long time ago. They were saying, well, we can't have tubs, birthing tubs, the big deep tubs, because the weight of the tubs and the water, and we don't know what's going to. I said, you all have MRIs and CAT scans, and they haven't fallen through a floor yet. So you're going to tell me a birthing tub, because of the water, is going to fall through the floor? It's just been a thing that we just, we finally do have tubs that, women can be in. That was a
Right.
battle. But as
Yes.
far as birthing tubs in this area, now you can go, Lansing is kind of in the middle. Lansing, East Lansing is like in the middle of Michigan. You can go 45 minutes to an hour away in any direction, and you're going to find some place where there's birthing tubs. So, there's there, and another, and I, how old people are, you start wondering. I often say to women, because women will come in and say, what are their pain relief methods? And we'll talk about what's available. And, women inevitably will say, well, what did you do, Sameerah? I said, well, I just had babies, because there were no epidurals back then. And they look at me, Jenny, and they're with their,
right? How did you survive?
Yeah.
Right?
I said, you do know that the majority of the world, even as we're talking right now, is having babies without epidurals.
That's right. Well, I think it speaks to the uniqueness of the American situation. So, you've described beautifully how you've spent your career empowering and centering women, patients, birthing people, and their wishes, their desires, if they even have them, or if they don't, educating them and supporting them to consider. And
Yes.
what I get from that, and it's not just you, it's, we speak to so many other midwives, especially the elder midwives. What I get from that is, in the absence of you being there, standing as that advocate, that may not necessarily happen. And this is
Absolutely.
where we realize that in the American context, maternity, pregnancy, delivery, postpartum, there's no autonomy,
Right.
there's no respect, there's no dignity. Because if it's contingent on elder midwife Sameerah being in the room so that yes, I can lay on my side, then we don't have anything much. Because if she's not there, then what?
Yes. Yes.
Right?
Well,
And so,
the interesting thing that's happened in this community, like a lot of the nurses that I worked with as staff nurses, there used to be a thing, oh, we know Sameerah patients when they come in. We know. But because we had worked together as staff nurses, when I came back as a midwife, they were open to, okay, what do you teach us? So there was a whole generation of staff nurses that were comfortable with
yes,
somebody squatting for pushing,
yes,
or somebody doing. As a matter of fact, a lot of the residents that are now attendings in this area, I knew when they were residents, and they learned from me about, have her do this, try this. Well, she's not making any progress. Was how long has she been laying laying in the bed?
right?
Those kind of things. There, there, there was a lot of exchange of information, so those nurses knew how to support normal birth.
That's right. And that was because of your presence. That was
Yeah.
because of your support for them, your
Yes.
encouragement for them to go outside of the norm and maybe even take a chance. In the hospital environment, sad to say, really the home of the interventions, right? The genesis of all of the obstetric things that we still suffer from, but also maybe, from back in the day. Like, for example, you mentioned you had your feet buckled into the stirrups, not just laid
Yes.
on top of, or you're
Right.
inserting your feet into the horseshoe thingy. No,
Yes.
they were strapped, buckled.
Yep.
But
You were strapped
prior
down.
generations, hospital birthers, all the women that had access to the OBs, they had their hands tied by matter of course, or they had
Yes.
the gown that swaddled them like a straitjacket on purpose. They had
Yes.
the restrictions and the restraints because they were literally unconscious. All of
Yes.
these interventions that grew into obstetrics became normalized because the
Mhm.
midwives were removed and the
Yes.
midwife skills, the midwives, even just that listening was
Yes.
totally eradicated from pregnancy right through. You made
Yes.
it through your breastfeeding because somebody listened to you.
Hmm.
That's it. It's
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
simple. Not even
Yeah.
expensive, right? At the end of the day, these are the things that, for the absence of these things and the new or, more invasive things that were put in their place, have led us to this situation that we're in today. So, all birthing people, all families, all communities, according to whatever is the prevailing way of being. So, for example, you said in Lansing, it's not possible to have a water birth or even get in a tub, yet another area it is. So,
Hmm.
according across this country, according to whichever is the prevailing way of being, who has the power, who gets to make these decisions, who writes the policy, who follows the policy, even whether it's
Yes.
written or not, all of these things are so inconsistent,
Hmm.
right? That we cannot get ourselves to land on an agreed system of care as far as
Yes.
maternal health,
Yes.
and to our detriment. And the most marginalized of us suffer exponentially more because
Mhm.
of it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I remember, and some of the younger nurses laugh when I tell them, when I had my first baby, postpartum perinatal care, they came and they put your legs over this thing and they put a heat lamp on your bottom because the thought was we're drying out the stitches and that's going to help it heal. Now,
That's
when
right.
you think about it, the ridiculousness of putting heat to an area that's already traumatized and swollen,
Hmm.
I mean, like immediately after they've got this heat lamp on you, the young nurses are like, "What?" Because now we do the ice diapers and stuff like that. Why? I said that's what people believed.
That's right.
You put the heat there, it dries out all the stitches. I remember
Yeah.
the nurse left the room, and I took my legs out of the thing, and she said, "Oh, you got to be on the heat lamp's got to be on your perineum for 20 minutes." And I said, "Okay." About 5 minutes before she's supposed to come back, I put my feet back up
Right. You were a
because
rebel from
it hurt.
early.
I was in so much pain.
Well, see, this
Um,
is the thing. And if you think about the actual things that really do work, oh,
mhm.
those are the traditional things.
Yes.
When you mentioned that your mom, your grandma were healers because
Mhm.
they knew plants,
Mhm.
that's it. That's
Yeah.
literally it.
Yeah.
Because they knew plants, they actually had the remedies.
Yes.
Because they understood how to use those plants, they were healers. Like
Mhm.
there's this sort of straightforwardness about how we, as midwives, work whichever environment we're in, right?
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
think,
Yeah.
especially in the United States, the hospital-based midwives have a time of having any chance of really being independent, autonomous, having some power for themselves in terms
Mhm.
of, working in the team. And it's
Yes.
a shame because many of them struggle, and have a hard time with, do I want to keep this job or do I want to get out of here? Like, which one?
Absolutely.
And then the other side of the coin, the community midwives have an equal dilemma because one, they are ostracized. Two, they're invisibilized. Three, they have no respect, very little, right?
Mhm.
They certainly,
Mhm.
no one wants to collaborate. For some strange reason, we've decided that we can go overseas and create all kinds of models of
Oh.
collaboration and care, but not
Yep.
here.
Not here.
We have to
Mhm.
wait till we
Mhm.
get to the mission field on the other side of the world. But
Mhm.
certainly, we're not going to treat anyone, especially in our, folk who are more at risk, with any kind of dignity, support, or even respect. And our providers who try to stand in that gap with them become problematic too
Yes.
because of trying to
Mhm.
stand in that gap. You
Yeah.
clearly built a level of respect in your hospital, in your area, in your county, in your state, whereby people were, oh, we will listen and follow Mama Sameerah. What do you think that was about? How did you get that done?
Well, I believe that it's because I was meticulous in my study. I think that's part of it. Because I was being challenged. Does she really know what she's talking about? Has she really studied? So I always came in prepared with information, and for lack of a better way of saying it, knowing who the adversary was, and knowing what kinds of things they may be looking for. Also knowing my own shortcomings
Mm.
and being willing to be open to share information even when people didn't necessarily want to share with me. So because I remember I had this experience. This was in nursing school, and my best friend in nursing school was a young white woman who's just lovely. We were good friends and good support for one another. And so we would study together. And so one day, long story short, we were outside of one of our professors' offices, and there was a bulletin board, and they would post your grades by your student number. So there were no names or anything.
Mm.
So you
Yes.
could go look at your student number and see what your grade was. So we were standing there, and she looks at her grade. She says, "Oh, I did pretty good, Sameerah." And she told me whatever number it was. She said, "How did you do?" I said, "Oh, it's great." I said, "I got a 97 or whatever it was, 98, something like that." So there was another young woman of European descent that was standing there as well around the board. And she says to me, they have to give you A's because they get money from the federal government. Miss Joseph, I have to tell people that Jesus did not have my tongue back then. But this
Mm.
young lady who was my friend, she said, "Come on, Samir, let's just go on down the hall." I said, oh no, we." And so I said to the young woman, now mind you, this classmate of mine, this young white woman, she had 3 kids and was on welfare. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm the one working part-time plus in nursing school full-time. I told her nobody has given me anything. I earn every grade that I get. I said, and what is your excuse that you're sitting at home on welfare and they pay for childcare for you to come to nursing school and you can't get an A? And she just kind of looked at me. So, and then I had the reputation in the nursing school, and this was not anything that I intended. I just like,
Mm-hmm.
I have a level of personal excellence that I like to strive for.
Yes.
So the professors in the nursing school, other nurses that were coming, this was after I had graduated and I'm on to midwifery or whatever. I met a young woman who was in the program, the nursing program. She said, "Oh, we heard about you. All the instructors talk about Sameerah was such a," and I was a 4.0 student through nursing school.
Mm.
So I did everything to the best of my ability. The nurses that I worked with, we worked together. I have been the only African American nurse for decades. Almost everything out of college, every place I've worked, just about, I've been the only Black person there. So I understand what it's like to be in that kind of environment, and I also understand how to field questions and answer questions. Like I just simple things like I never let my certification lapse. I try
Mm-hmm.
to never give them any kind of ammunition, if you will, to question that I know what I'm doing, and I also know what I don't know.
Right.
So
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm doing a lot of GYN. I'll give you an example. I do a lot of GYN as well as maternal child. And I had an older woman, older than me, and she came in and she had what she thought was like a swelling in the labial area. And I said, well, maybe it's a cyst, and we'll numb it up. I put the topical on and then I put the local in, and I opened it and nothing, literally nothing came out. And I'm just trying to see what goes on. I know enough to know something's not right here.
Not right. Mm-hmm.
So I have one of the docs come in and they actually go in, they do a bigger incision, that's what they do, um, and took some of it out, and she had cancer.
Aye.
So, but I knew enough to say, okay, something's not right here. So I
Yes.
know enough about normal to know when it's not. And so I think for a lot of people, once they saw that I knew what I was doing and I produced results,
Yes.
and more than, let's just be honest about it because it's about economics. I was never not busy. So I
Right.
was making money for the hospital system. People came to, on in terms of that professional quote unquote side, respect respect what I do. For the people that I serve, the families that I've served, I've done exactly that.
Yes.
You
And they
know,
can count on that, right? That's
yes,
one of the things I think that's so key, the
yes,
consistency of being
exactly,
that way.
exactly. I had a patient. I think this was I caught all of her babies. I think this was baby number, it's either 3 or 4. Because when I was practicing by myself, I would tell people, because there were usually the two things that I did. I would go to the ACNM conference. Sometimes I would go to Midwives Association of Midwives Alliance of North America. I would do at least a week for that. And then I would try to take some time off with, my kids. Because by the time I finished midwifery school, I was divorced. So it was
Hmm.
me, I was single mom, whatever. So I would be clear with my patients. I'm going to be gone this time.
Yes.
And I would try not to take anybody that was due around that time, just so it would decrease the chance that I was going to miss the birth. So anyway, it was one of those situations, and I saw her for a prenatal visit, and I said, "Well, I'm going to be gone. I'm going to the midwives conference." And she said, "Yeah, I know." I said, "Okay, I just want to make sure." Don't you know, Jenny, I was packed heading to Detroit, which is about an hour from where I live, an hour and a half to the airport. And so my phone rings. This is back before cell phones. Now I don't know how she found my phone number, but she called and I picked up the phone and she said, "This is so and so." She said, "I don't take long. I'm in labor. I'm at the hospital. If you come by now, I promise you I'll be done in time for you to get to the airport and get your plane." So I went, and sure enough, she
That's
delivered
right.
me maybe 20, 30 minutes after I got there. She said, I know I cut it close, but just thank you so much for being here and stuff like that. I said, "Now I was not gonna leave you hanging." So,
That's
but it's
right.
it's it's stuff like that. And when I was when I was by myself, I would limit the number of people that I took, due dates that I would take, just so that
Hmm.
I could have some semblance of, no, I wasn't even in a semblance of normalcy. I was overworked, et cetera, et cetera. But it was because of the commitment to midwifery and
Hmm.
knowing the impact that it can have on women
That's
for their,
right.
yeah, for their that autonomy you talked about, and empowerment and things like that. So it was never a question, because it's certainly, I tell people all the time, it's not an ego thing. You don't get a lot of strokes for being a midwife. That's why I was so happy when you got the recognition that you did with Time magazine. So, I mean, because what is she? She just, that's the little midwife. I mean,
Right. That's exactly how I feel too.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. It's interesting. I think the things that we want for our clients, our patients, our mamas, is the same thing that I maybe, I don't want to speak for everybody, but I feel like that's how we try to model our midwife
hmm,
behavior.
yes,
Like, we
exactly.
are providing options, we're giving choice, we're supporting their own quirky ways, we're holding
Yep,
the hands, we're standing in the gap. And I feel
yep,
like
yep.
in terms of midwifery, we also need that. We also need some grace and some understanding. We also
Yes,
need we definitely need the support, whether it's, whether not so much even maybe the emotional support, but it's more of the structural support. Like
yes,
when you have physician providers who will back you up authentically and,
hmm,
respectfully, everybody wins. When you
yes,
have access to emergency coverage, when you have just billing and claims that might actually get paid, these
hmm,
little pieces, nuances that wear away at us as midwives and take us off of our path, our chosen paths to be continuously and authentically with women, with
Yes.
birthing families. It's so hard when the structure is not there, the infrastructure is not there, and I'm going to say even the will is not there to
Yes.
support us.
Yes.
That's been taken and has never come back for midwifery.
Yeah. And the thing is, when you look at it from, for lack of a better descriptive terminology, the capitalist way of thinking,
Yes.
birth is a renewable source of income. I
Yes.
mean, every generation is going to have babies.
Right?
Just like on the other end, we all got that appointment with dying. So people at either end of the spectrum, so to speak,
Mm-hmm.
have guaranteed, so to speak, customers. So, and for a lot of people, it's seen like that because also that's the way our health system is. We're really not a health system, just my opinion. We're a sickness system.
That's
You
right.
know, you go to see whatever healthcare provider when you're not feeling well. And when you go for your annual yearly exam or whatever it might be called,
Mm-hmm.
how much information do you get to keep yourself healthy, or how much of it is looking for things that are wrong? So, it's a mindset, um, but it's based on, what's billable. What can we
Yes.
get money for? So, and I've always worked in a setting where the practice was either owned by the providers or owned by the hospital system.
Mm.
So I've never had to do my own billing. For a
Yeah.
while, they used to, this was way when I first started back in 94, 95. So they would, I worked for an HMO in the OB department, and they would send us for billing seminars. And so again, because my tongue was not as restrained as it is now, I'm like,
Yeah.
why do you all have us in here when you're going to change all the numbers in 6 months anyway and come up with some new
Indeed.
diagnoses? I said, just pay the billing people to do it. And they were always like, Sameerah, just,
Yeah.
for a while, I think people thought I didn't have much of a filter back in my early days, but it didn't make sense to me. I am in a
Right.
full day billing seminar, and you're going to tell me in 3-4 months that now you've added 1,000 more codes. I let
That's
people
right.
do it, that this is what they do.
There's
So,
so many nuances and areas that we just like throw our hands up because nothing makes sense. Nothing ever has made sense. And we're still here on the short end of those sticks, you
yes,
know?
yes.
And, it's hard to not have hope. I mean, what would you say, what wisdom would you share with the young midwives or the student
Mm.
midwives or the I'm dreaming of being a midwife, those young ones? What would you
Um,
want them to understand about the deeper purpose of this work today?
mhm, mhm, mhm. It has to come from it has to come from your soul,
Hmm.
because it can't come from the things that are easily swayed or dissuaded, or the things that, if you're in this to make $1 million, although you can, I mean, I'm sure you can, um, it's got to come from a deeper place that goes beyond your ego.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I have often said this because I've had students, midwife students, nursing students, med students. It's like, this is my opinion, there should be no ego in what we do, because
Right.
ego will get you in trouble. Ego will make
It
you
can be
say,
dangerous.
yeah, I know what I'm talking about, when you really don't. But your ego is just you're so puffed up and prideful. You don't want to say, hey, can you come take a look at this? I don't know what's going on. This is what's happening. Can you give me some insight or whatever? It has to come from a place that's deep in you, or you won't last long. And
That's
that has
right.
certainly happened. I mean, some people come through and, they get the midwifery credentials and they go, and they don't last very long, because if you don't love it's like OB period, I think. If you don't love it, you're just not going to last long. I had classmates in nursing school that were like, there's no way I'll ever go to labor and delivery, and I'll just, whatever. Um,
Hmm.
and to expect that the rewards come in ways that you are not imagining at this moment, in being early on or dreaming about it or whatever. Um, I've had situations, like my kids are 50, 45, and 37. I I still live in the same community where they were born and went to school, et cetera, et cetera. I still see their their contemporaries that still live in
Mhm.
the area, and
Yeah.
they still remember that I'm a midwife. A lot of them I caught. Um, Now I
Yeah.
have grandchildren. I have grown grandchildren, and I have a great grand that's getting ready to start high school. So I've been here a long time. And to me, nothing is more touching and more rewarding than when my daughter used to live in Japan. She came home with her two kids. They share my house. So I have now two kids, two grandchildren in the same high school that my kids went to. And my
That is.
grandchildren come home and tell me, my friend said that you were there when he was born, when she was born, and her mom said this, and
Yeah.
that's the stuff that's priceless to me. And
It
that
is.
the mom talks about they had a good experience, and that my mom said she remembers when your grandma came in and helped her with breastfeed, just stuff like that's the stuff to me that's
Yes.
invaluable,
Yes.
and it
Um,
tells us the impact of midwifery
it
on
does.
that woman and future generations. So
How do you take care of yourself? Because you are long
mhm,
lived in this work. You are still here. Maybe you're not
yeah,
practicing, but you are still a midwife.
yeah,
How are you
yeah.
taking care of you?
Well, I I went off track, so to speak, for about, it's not really off track, but anyway, I was with a private practice for about 5 years, and then COVID hit. And they're like, I'm gonna try to be nice about it. They're like, you old, we don't want you out here. We don't want you to catch COVID and croak, right? So they said, well, okay, we just kind of came to the conclusion, and yeah, okay. So anyway, the way that God works, right before COVID hit, I read, and because I'm always reading something, and I said, oh, look at this. Michigan State University School of Nursing was looking to give nurses, registered nurses, training as sexual assault nurse examiners. So
Oh.
me being I like to learn stuff. I'm like, well, let me go check this out, because I thought this could be something potentially that I could add to my practice, because the number of women that have sexual assault is part of their history. Well,
Hmm.
you know how that goes. So I went, and it was 5 days of training, and you had the clinical part, stuff like that. So on the second day, um, one of the facilitators came up to me and said, what would we have to offer you to get you to come and open this program at Michigan State University, this sexual assault health examiner? It's called the Sexual Assault Healthcare Program. I said, well, let me think about it. So the next day she gave me a number, and I said, yeah, that'll work. Plus I had always thought about working, for Michigan State, because that's
Hmm.
one of my alma maters. So I went and I was there for 3 years, set up that program, got it up and running all the way through COVID to the time that the students came back, and everything. So that was a time that I was away from what we consider traditional midwifery practice.
Mm.
So then when I had to leave there because of a story that I'll tell you in private, I was like, I'm out. I did not have another job. I just said, can't do this. Place is not where I should be. Um, a colleague of mine, as a matter of fact, it was Charlie
Oh,
in
yes.
Detroit. She sent me this message. She said, "Have you seen this?" And it was a offer for a job. It was a position open at the place I had worked with for forever. So I applied, and they're like, "Oh, Sameerah, you're still around. Come on in." So it wasn't like an interview. I'm just going, and people are like, "Oh, Sameerah, you coming back? Oh, that's going to be so great." And I'm like, "I'm not making any promises." But anyway, long story short, I came back, but I came back on my own terms.
That's right. Well
And
deserved as well.
see, and like, okay, like, they like to tell you, okay, you only have this much time off. And I said to one of the managers, I said, when I request time off, I'm not asking. I'm just telling you those are the days I'm not going to be here. Plus, when I came to Bali last year, they're like, well, I had just come back October of 23. So, yeah, so I hadn't been there quite a year yet. And so they said, well, you're asking for this time off. You won't get paid. I said, when I ask you for time off, paid or not. That's when I'm not going to be here. Now, Sameerah before would have been, can I please have this time off? It would be really nice. So now I go, on my own terms. I have been teaching younger student midwives and student nurses and stuff to always advocate for yourself.
That's right.
I decided what salary I needed in order to come back because I'm not 20. I'm not
This is
even 60.
the elder status, and this is
Yes.
the opportunity to be in all of your elderlessness
Mm-hmm.
and all of your power.
Mm-hmm. I
And
just say they'll say I'm a crazy old lady. So
either way, either way. Well,
yeah,
it's been
I take time off. I enjoy being a grandmother and a great grandmother. Um, I meditate a lot. I pray a lot, of course, with the work that I do with church. My church work is very
Mhm,
fulfilling and
mhm,
frustrating because God's people are frustrating no matter what setting you find yourself in. Um,
mhm.
and I just really I would say probably over the last 5 years or so, I'm just like, God has taken really good care of me, and I just need to relax and, you know,
Rest in that.
yes,
Mhm.
exactly, exactly.
Well, this podcast is called The Perinatal Pause, and I just want to thank you so much, Elder Midwife Sameerah, for pausing with us and sharing your sacred story. And
Yeah.
may your hands and your heart and your history
Mm,
continue to guide us, because this has been a moment of remembering and
hmm.
resting and reclaiming. And I'm so very grateful. Thank you for joining me on the perinatal pause and
I'm
the
so
hands that caught
grateful.
us.
Yes, I'm so grateful that you asked and that I could participate. Surely do appreciate it.
Thank you.
Mhm.